Welcome to Pittman and Friends, the curiously probing, sometimes awkward, but always revealing conversations between your host, Anne Arundel County Executive Steuart Pittman, that's me, and whatever brave and willing public servant, community leader, or elected official I can find who has something to say that you should hear. This podcast is provided as a public service of Anne Arundel County, so don't expect me to get all partisan here. This is about the age-old art of government, of, by, and for the people. Welcome, everybody. I am here today with a really good friend, a really cool person, the budget officer of Anne Arundel County, Chris Trumbauer. Welcome.
Wow, those things don't normally all sync up, but sure.
Hey, you know what? I got to warn y'all that Chris was on an airplane all night, and before that, he was in a race in the mountains in California for the weekend, running 100 kilometers, which is about 60 miles. And so if he falls asleep, I'll just keep it going.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah.
Like talking about the budget is like adrenaline to me, so it'll be fine. Sure, your listeners are going to love it.
Chris is normally a very energetic person, but he claims he had a really good time doing that. I can't imagine. But anyway, so budget officer, it's budget season, and I thought it'd be a really good time to sit down with you and talk big picture about what the budget office does. And that seems like a boring topic, but actually it's not. It's really probably the most important. It's definitely the most important thing that our administration does every year, and it's how we're judged. So tell me what the budget office is, how many people, and then we'll talk about what the budget officer is in the charter.
Okay, so the budget office is 9 people, including me, but I don't really do anything. So it's the other 8 people that do all the work. And they're budget analysts, and what they're responsible for is we divide up all the different departments of the county. You know, you have like 25, 30 different departments and agencies, and we have to track their budgets throughout the year. But as you mentioned, right now it's budget season, which is like the one time a year where people pay attention to us, right? So we're putting together your budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And every single department has their own little micro budget that we have to put together, make sure it's balanced, make sure they have the resources that they need.
It's budget season. You're really kind of past putting together the budget proposal. You're in the process of actually sending it to the printer, I assume, right?
At this moment in time, as we're speaking, it's getting the final proof. It's going to the printer.
Okay.
Right. But by the time people hear this, you will have already introduced the budget.
Exactly. And then you'll be in the process of working with the auditor and the council to make it even better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They have 45 days to check our work.
Okay. And I will just say that your team is awesome. I remember the very first budget. This was before you were the budget officer. You were part of our administration. But remember that first budget, and we celebrated when it passed through the council?
Are you asking if I remember the karaoke?
The karaoke at Stan and Joe's, yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't know budget people could sing.
Well, you know, life's full of surprises.
They didn't know that some of them could sing either.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a whole lot of fun. It's a good team. They work really, really hard, and really they know, these analysts know county government inside out, and their job is to really engage with the staff in every department, figure out where we can trim and where we can't, and where we need to add some money for some more services.
Yeah. So, well, the other big part is the revenue projection. So, you know, just like you have a budget at home and you have to figure out how much your paycheck is and that's what you can spend, right? We have to do that on a much bigger scale. And we have an excellent revenue estimator, Tuja Hasim. He's been here been with the county for 12 plus years, I think. So he knows what he's doing, and he gives us the numbers, and you tell us what you want to do, and we do a little bit of magic, and we figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, or at least to try, and it's an interesting dynamic. We'll get into that. We'll get into the fact that Anne Arundel County really has been incredibly responsible. I would say even before our administration, try to give credit where it's due in the past, but in our administration particularly, which is why we have a pretty darn good budget that people will see this year. But the county charter, which I think is a fascinating document, they really understood how important budgeting and finance was. And the budget officer in our charter is where in the succession?
You mean like if you're out of town or something?
Or die or
well,
something like that.
Certainly we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah. Or go to jail like 2 county executives have.
Yeah.
Of the 10.
Listen, I'm rooting for you. I think you're going to be fine.
Right.
But yeah, so the succession is you have a chief administrative officer who I believe has been on the show. She's the next one, and then if she's unable to fill that role because like you're both out of town at the same thing, then unfortunately I pick up that role at that point.
You pick up that role,
Yeah.
and budget officer John Hammond actually served as county executive while the council was. The council ultimately replaces the county executive when they go to jail in that case.
Yeah, I was. I remember that.
So you could be in that position, and the reason for that is the budget officer really knows county government.
To be clear, I do not want to be in that position, so I just like to keep you where you are. That'd be great.
I will say that, and we'll get into you. We should start talking about you a little bit and how you ended up in this job.
People don't want to hear that.
But there were a lot of people who thought that you should run for county executive because you were on the county council and you were highly, highly respected. And you actually spent a week, I understand, hanging out at the budget office. I'm not giving any council members ideas right now. Hanging out at the budget office during the process so that you would learn it, right?
Well, I mean, I think that's grown into a little bit of an urban legend. But yeah, so what I used to do, because I was on the county council from 2010 to 2018.
Right.
And when budget season comes around, I had a job, right? I had a 40-plus hour a week job. I would take time off the job so that I could go down and meet with Teresa Sutherland, the auditor, or, talk to John Hammond, who was the budget officer at the time, and just try and figure out what's going on, because I knew how important budget was, and I wanted to figure out how it all works. And so I guess I did, and that's why when you had a vacancy at budget officer, and you're like, well, let's throw Trumbauer over there, even though, to your listeners, I have absolutely zero formal budget or finance training, but I have a lot of experience actually working on budgets, working on Anne Arundel County budgets for my role in the legislative branch. But then when your administration first came on, I was kind of your liaison to the budget office, and then I guess for reasons only known to you, you stuck me over there, and I've been there ever since.
Well, if we back up a little bit, so you did not want to run for county executive.
I did not.
Nobody did.
Nobody wanted
to challenge
me to,
the incumbent. Well, there were some people who did, and I ended up being the candidate. I think because there was nobody else. And I remember preparing for one of my first debates presentations. You role modeled for me how to do it. And so, to be perfectly honest, I've always been a little bit intimidated by you, that you're the person who really knows this job, knows how to do this before I did. I think I've caught up. Okay, I think I've learned the job.
Yeah, you're doing great.
No question about it. So instead what I did was I asked you to serve in the administration when I got elected.
Which I wasn't planning to do.
No,
He's like,
You're quite happy in your
I
job,
wasn't angling for that. You kind of brought me over.
No, and it was...
You and Pete Barron, you ganged up on me.
Yeah. So you were the co-chair of the transition committee.
That's right.
With former county executive Janet Owens.
That's right, yeah.
And then you had to tell your boss, you waited until I got elected, but we were recruiting you the whole time. And then we put you in a position which was polycoms, right?
Yeah, you asked me to create a position for myself. So I said I wanted to be policy and communication because they go hand in hand. You can have the best policy in the world, but if you can't explain it to people, it's no good. And if you're a really good explainer, but you got nothing to explain, what's the point, right? So I wanted to mix those two together, and it was pretty wild ride for a while.
So in other words, you have been at the core of the work that the administration has done since day one, and then we had John Hammond in. He stuck around to help us get through that first budget, but really Jessica Lays was acting, and she ended up over at Rec and Parks, which is where her heart was. And then we hired somebody for a year, didn't work out all that well, and we needed an acting while we did. The idea was to do a recruitment, I think, when you first went in. Wasn't it going to be temporary?
Yeah, Matt Power was your CAO at the time, and he's like, "Oh, come on, man, just go over there and do it for a while. We'll hire someone; it'll be fine." Yeah.
And it wasn't just that you were good at it, but you actually said you liked it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really grew on me because I really like the budget, and as we said at the beginning, we have just an amazing team of people they're really great and smart and hardworking, and so being a part of that team and getting to run interference for them and getting to harness their potential and then matching that up with the kind of things that you're trying to do for Anne Arundel County, I mean, that's exciting because we talk about this a lot, but budget isn't about numbers. I mean, it is, but not really, right? Mm-hmm. Budget's about values. Budget's about people. Right. And that's what gets me excited. And so the budget is just a giant jigsaw puzzle, putting all the pieces together to achieve what you're trying to do. And that is exciting to me.
So we got to work together on a budget, and it was, for me, it was like I just knew it was right to have a person in that position who really shared my values, and I had no doubt ever about that, sharing the values. And so when you told me there was no money to do something I wanted to do, I believed you.
Wow. That's good to know.
And sometimes, when it's somebody who doesn't share your values, we've talked about stories in the past of county executives and budget officers and budget teams where there's a real battle going on all the time, and that would be terrible. Yeah. So we've had a good run. How many budgets have we done together?
Well, this will be our 6th.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this will be your 7th budget. I was involved in the first one, but actually being a part of the budget office, I guess this will be my 5th one where I've been your budget officer. Yeah. Okay. So I will say that, well, both of us remember the COVID budget. The projections were that the economy was going to kind of tank. There would be a recession, possibly, and so it would have if the government hadn't poured in billions of dollars.
Yeah. Well, and so the federal government was a partner in that. Yeah. And I will say that even started under the Trump administration with the CARES Act and a lot of that support, and then it continued when Biden got elected. But our economy was doing well, so we've had a good run, and then. This year, I was very worried that we would not be able to, what I often say, protect our people from, negative impacts of federal cuts and protect our people from what might happen to the economy. And a lot of us thought that in this year's budget, that it would be cuts and maybe even tax increases. That's what's been going on at the state level. That's what's been going on at the federal level. Major tax increases with tariffs and major cuts everywhere, thanks to DOGE and all of that. And it's a scary time, but we've come out with something pretty good, don't you think?
I mean, I think it's a pretty good budget, and like you said, we were a little anxious that we wouldn't be able to do everything you wanted to do with our existing revenue because of some of the things you mentioned. But we had a couple things going for us. We do have a really strong fiscal foundation because of the last several years of budgeting. We have some of the constructs of our particular county budget are, in our favor. But, I think we've got a resilient budget. I think that we absorbed a lot of things this year, right? We absorbed, the state had their own budget issues, and as one does, they push a little bit of it down to us, and so we had to pick that up. We've got definitely... Yeah,
we're talking like $12 million in pension.
About $12 million, and that's not as bad.
And a little bit more from SDAT.
Well, it's about $9 million for the share of teacher pensions that the state used to pay for, and now the counties have to. Same thing, with the community college. And then there's a shift in the county proportion that we pay for SDAT, the State Department of Assessments and Taxations, to do their work. And so you add all that together, it's $12 million. So we had to absorb that,
So we were all very worried, not just because it was going on at the state level, but federal as well. And we're always worried and about what we're going to be able to do in the budget. So we do our budget town halls in January, February. You sit with me, you do, and we listen in all 7 council districts, and then you do presentations. And in your presentations, you shared some of the projections that we had pretty good recurring revenue, like $105 million over the year before, something like that. And then you showed that there wouldn't be much left over for new spending because of increased costs and expected increased costs. So tell us how it works, how we get from budget town hall to where we are today?
Sure. So at the budget town hall, which are generally in January, we've got about half a year of data to kind of look so far in the fiscal year and project ahead. We're also doing rough estimates on some of the building blocks of the budget, like what do we think the employee pay packages might be? What do we think the contract renewals are going to add up to? What are some other big picture things that are out there that we know we're going to have to adjust? And we kind of keep a running tab of that. So when we're doing the budget town halls, we don't know exactly how everything's going to end up, but we kind of have a decent feel for how it's going. And what we knew then and what we now know is that the expenditure side, the cost side, was going up for a number of things. And this is a phenomenon going all over the place, right? Sure. Every government, every household budget. So we needed to figure out a way, to make that work. But the revenue side, like you mentioned, was looking pretty good. We've got strong revenue. Our big sources are property tax, income tax, and recordation and transfer tax. And property tax is solid. Income tax, we have a good base. It's our projections are going to start slowing in terms of future growth for all the macroeconomic reasons that you mentioned before. And recordation and transfer tax is the little bit that we get for real estate transactions. That went down precipitously a couple years ago, and it's kind of bounced off the bottom and is starting to come up a little bit. So that's kind of a good news story. But all that is to say, we've got a pretty solid revenue foundation, and it's not growing, gangbusters at the moment, but it still looks okay. So what we were messaging at those town halls is county's looking okay, but we're not going to have the same continued amount of growth that we've seen in some of your previous budgets, and that ended up being true, but we're not also in a scenario where we had to make dramatic reductions in the services that people depend on, or start taking away from some of the things that we put money in to help us out in the future.
And one of the things that we heard in the budget town halls over and over again was that people were worried about the most vulnerable Anne Arundel County residents economically and how they would fare under the Trump administration's threats to cut education, to cut a lot of health and human services, to cut housing money, to cut possibly Medicaid, Medicare. And so I heard a strong message that we should really be careful that we continue to protect those folks. So as we got into the requests from departments, we hear from each department. Your staff works with them first. They come up with their departmental budget proposals, and they massage what they've been doing and see if they can make a few reductions without hurting services. And then the departments often come out with proposals, most of which we know about in advance. Some of them were talked about at budget town halls. I knew that there were some things that I felt like we could almost not live without on the health and human services side of things. And so when I was hearing them, I knew we couldn't say yes because we didn't know if we would be able to fund them. So we said we categorized the wants in category 1, 2, 3. When we got to the end, there was a big question about whether we didn't look like we could do it. But then you all are constantly looking at things change during the process. And you figured out that there was some additional money that we could use to cover some of that stuff. Do you want to tell us what that was?
Well, sure. I mean, there was a bunch of different secret sauce that we used. For some of the health and human services things, we were able to use some of the other funding streams that the county gets through our opioid restitution fund and things like that, where we could take some of the programs they had proposed and they were compatible with those other funding streams, and so we could do that. We also got some late-breaking favorable news from the state where they put together their personal property estimates, and that had gone up a little bit. So we were able to incorporate that. And then we talked about the idea of there was the parking fee that people have paid in this county for, the last 30 years and hasn't changed. It hadn't gone up. It was a flat fee. And we thought, well, everything else has gone up a lot and that's not indexed.
Mostly around the airport.
The paid parking lots. So we did that. And we threw a bunch of stuff together because you were pretty loud and clear. Like, these are the programs that you need to keep going at this point in time. And so we bent over backwards to find a way to do that. And we wanted to do it.
Well, and then a big one was also the value of what we were putting into the OPEB, the retiree health, had done well because the stock market had done well, right?
Right. So we have a fund that helps pay for our retiree health care, and the way that works is, we have a bunch of market investments, and when the market does well, that means that there are returns from that are going into the fund, and so we have to put essentially less cash in, to augment that. And it doesn't jump up and down really drastically because it does a 5-year average of market returns, and it just happened that the latest valuation they did, the new 2 years that came on board were really great years, and the 2 years that dropped off, the previous 6th and 7th year were terrible years, and so it brought that market return average up. And so we see that whenever they do the valuation, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and so it's standard policy. But that, when we got that number back from our actuary, that allowed us to free up some of those funds and put them to the other expenditures that you really wanted to do.
So that seemed fair game, and we were able to produce a budget that actually is $52 million over the previous year for the Board of Education. That's a record. $50 million was the most we'd ever done in the past.
And that doesn't even include the $9 million of teacher pensions we had to absorb too. So
right. And we were able to do a lot of the things that had proven to work during the pandemic and then been funded by federal money that we then were trying to decide whether we should maybe fund them one time, whether we could actually make them recurring.
Yeah.
So things like the food bank getting $1.5 million, which was what they requested in the budget, but also things like the real-time information center, the police department, to add another shift with 5 new positions and create our new animal services department, Department of Animal Services, to really deliver at our shelter, which hadn't been funded well, as well as in the fire department. And when you look around county government, it wasn't a bad year, not a bad year at all. And so my question is, how is it that Anne Arundel County is as resilient as we are? And we were told we were resilient by the 3 bond rating agencies, who we do our presentation, and the 3rd year in a row, 3 AAA bond ratings, even in this. And they were asking questions about how are we going to deal with, a potential recession or potential layoffs of a lot of federal workers. They were really looking at us as maybe vulnerable. So can you give your thoughts on why we're resilient to economic downturn to some degree, and what it is that you do in the budget office that helps make that so?
Sure. Well, so we're resilient, as you say, for a couple different reasons, but one of the primary ones is because we've been budgeting conservatively. And an example of that is a few years ago when real estate value and activity was going way, way up. We had a huge peak. We knew that wasn't sustainable, so we didn't spend all that money on recurring costs. Now, as we know, the real estate market went down, our revenue that was attached to that went down, but we're not here, I'm not freaking out, you're not freaking out, because it just went back down to the level we budgeted to. And that allowed us to not be in a deficit, right? So if we had spent all that money, like we did, the county did in 25 years ago during the Great Recession, and then they were in a big hole, we'd be in trouble. We also have about $170 million in our revenue reserve fund, which is there for if and when the next Great Recession does come, we'll have money.
We have grown and grown and grown by getting council bills to authorize a higher revenue reserve, right?
That's right, yes. You and the council have partnered to bring that up now to 8% of the county's general operating revenue. Right. So that's...
And we're fully funding that.
Yes. Yeah,
so what I've learned is there are all these little gimmicks that get done in various jurisdictions that you can budget irresponsibly or responsibly. And we have chosen the responsible route. And, when you look at... I don't want to I can throw the feds under the bus. They create money. They just borrow it, right? They don't have to balance their budget, really. They just create money. And they're continuing to do that. Right? They want a new debt ceiling, that's way higher than the one they've got. At the state level, they do balance their budget every year, but, they know if a structural deficit is coming, and DLS has been telling them since 2017. There's this whole debate over whether, the current problem is caused by the current governor or whether it is years and years in the making. And to me, looking at those gimmicks, it was years and years in the making, no question about it. When you have one-time money, like you didn't hire people, therefore at the end of the year you have money, which happened, during the last administration a lot, or you have federal money and it's not going to be recurring. When you start spending it on recurring stuff, then you create deficits. So we did not do those things, and I want to thank you for not letting me get away with doing those things. You never really, gave that option, but I think it was always clear that one of the things I wanted to do was be fiscally responsible, and it was always clear that you knew how to do that and your team knew how to do that.
Sure.
So here we are. But we are facing what some economists, a lot of economists are starting to say might well be an economic downturn, maybe even a recession. So how will that change, and how will we deal with that if it comes in Anne Arundel?
So that's a loaded question, because we don't know when that might be or what it will look like exactly. But what I can say is that we've put in that strong foundation to be as prepared as we can, and that includes having the maximum amount of funding in our rainy day fund. It includes conservative budgeting so that we're not over leveraged, and if we don't quite meet our revenue projections, we're not in super deep trouble. We're also protected for in some other things, like we have a very generous homestead credit on our property tax rate, right? So if you get a new assessment and your home value goes up, 25, 30%, you're only going to pay incrementally 2% a year on that until it catches up. So many people are being taxed at a much lower assessment rate than market value of their house. Now that's good for them as a homeowner, but for the county, that means that even if property values stagnated or went down, we wouldn't lose revenue until it ate up all of that buffer that the homestead credit created. And right now it's over $13 billion of value in our county that we have as that insulation. So, but we've done a lot of things.
And I will note that being that 2% is much lower than some jurisdictions the state allows you to go up to 10% a year increase.
Sure.
And others are somewhere between 2 and 10, but we've chosen to keep it at 2. Yeah.
Yes, 2%. I think that's either the lowest or among the lowest of all the counties. But we have a saying in budget world that you fix your roof when it's sunny, right? So we've had a good run the last few years, and we've been doing things to prepare for the next rainstorm, right? And it's not storming yet. But as you mentioned, I think we see some clouds on the horizon, and so it's a good thing we did all those things while we had the ability to do so.
Well, I want to thank you for all the work that you do, and I will note that in addition to what you do as our budget officer, you are an advisor to the administration on every issue when we need you. When when you have something to say, you're right there. You're on the 4th floor with us.
Yeah, I'm not bashful.
And part of the team. Yeah. And so the last thing I want to say to anybody who's listening is that you have, I hope, engaged in this process and followed it. And I'm really glad that you do, because a lot of what's in the budget is reflected in what people have said at town halls. The council now has the budget, and they're doing 2 hearings coming up, and I hope you'll engage with that as well. And I hope that y'all appreciate that you live in a county that takes spending taxpayers' dollars very seriously. What we didn't note was that the tax rates are staying the same in this budget, actually lowered a little bit on the property tax, staying the same on the income tax, and we remain the lowest in the central Maryland region on both, and we're proud of that. So thank you, Chris.
Sure.
And if you're watching this with a subscribe button on your screen, please hit it, and you'll get on our list to be notified about who our next guest is and what other cool stuff's going on in Anne Arundel County.